Welcome everybody. I see already we have 60 people here. I have a very great honor to introduce to you Georgia Ede. Yes, she wrote about what I experienced. I know for sure this is working, and that's why we as Stichting Medicijn, we really we support this metabolic psychiatry. We have seen this world with the Bazooki family, with all the books that are coming out. Georgia is the writer of the book Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. In the Dutch, it's called Heel Je Hoofd. We met each other 2 months ago in Ede. Very nice, Georgia Ede in Ede. Today I was in Ede as well. So let's give the stage to you. Let's do your presentation, and then we will take all the time for the questions. Is that okay, Georgia? I give.
Yes, absolutely.
You can share your screen, and then I will be leaving.
Dankjewel, Wim. Dankjewel. Thank you very much, Wim, and thank you very much for. We met each other actually a year ago, actually a little bit more than a year ago in Switzerland. And thank you very much for supporting the translation of the book into Dutch. And it was wonderful being in Ede in the Netherlands a couple of months ago, meeting you in person again, and meeting so many wonderful people in the Netherlands to talk about the book and talk about all the exciting new things that are happening in psychiatry, in mental health. So thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to start sharing my screen so you can see the slides. So as Wim was saying, I'm very excited that the book Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind has been translated into Dutch earlier this year, and by Lucht Publishing. And the book is about really two different things. It's about the relationship between food and the brain, the food choices that we make, the nutritional quality of the diet, and also the metabolic quality of the diet, which is how do the food choices we make affect brain metabolism, brain energy production. So we're going to talk about both of those aspects of how you can use this information, this new information in this book, to improve mental health for yourself or for your patients, if you are a practitioner, professional, or if you have a mental health issue yourself or in your family. The book gives you information that you can use to improve your mental health using dietary changes. So really, there's a lot of confusion about what we should eat. Even in 2024, there are many different ways of thinking about food, and it seems that the rules are changing all the time. When you look in the media headlines, or when the recommendations that are made, we hear mixed messages. One day eggs are good for you, the next day eggs are bad for you. There's confusion about saturated fat. There's been more interest lately in plant-based diets, vegan diets, vegetarian diets, and of course the Mediterranean diet. So how do we know which diet is best for the brain? So the reason why there's so much confusion about what the healthiest brain is for human biology is because this problem. So if you look at this screen, the slide, what you see is different types of scientific studies. And the reason why we're so confused about nutrition is because there's a type of study called an epidemiological study, which is not scientific. It's not based in biology. And I'll explain what I mean in a minute. And there's a whole chapter about this in the book. And it's really important because most of the studies in nutrition come from this type of study. Most of the headlines that you read in the media, most of the official recommendations that you hear about, things like whole grains are good for you, red meat is bad for you, we must eat a wide variety, a rainbow of fruits and vegetables. all of those beliefs that we have about nutrition, plants good, animals bad, all of that information comes from epidemiology. And epidemiology is not science. So it's really important to be able to recognize, identify when you are looking at information that comes from this unscientific place, and be able to ignore it so that you can focus on the real science, the real biology of food and the brain. And when you do that, everything becomes very simple. Rules about nutrition become very simple. So what are these studies? So epidemiology, the researchers who use this method called epidemiology, they are very interested in understanding the relationship between specific foods and specific diseases. And so that's so the way that they study this particular relationships is they begin by giving out surveys, by asking people questions about what they eat. So these are called food frequency questionnaires, and they give them to large numbers of people, sometimes tens of thousands of people, and they ask them about their eating habits. But the problem with these surveys is the questions on these surveys are very strange, and they're very difficult to answer correctly. So here's an example of an actual question from an actual food epidemiological study, which is actually very commonly used. So here's an example of a question. Think about this. How accurately could you answer this question? How many half-cup servings of blueberries have you eaten on average over the past year? So most people cannot give a good answer to that question. You're not allowed to say you don't know. You're not allowed to say you can't remember. You're not allowed to say, are you kidding me? This is impossible. You must choose a quantity. You're forced to give a number. So this is not real data. This is a guess. These are wild guesses. So then what the researchers do is they look through these answers, and then they try to find connections, patterns between how many blueberries people say that they ate and whether or not they developed a health problem, say, for example, memory problems. So then they looked and see, well, did the people who said that they ate more blueberries, did they do better on these memory tests than the people who said they ate fewer blueberries? And then they might publish a headline that says, oh, people who eat more blueberries have a reduced risk for dementia. So that's the kind of headline that you might see. Now, one of the many problems with these studies is that these relationships, these connections between something like blueberries and dementia, or maybe it's red meat and cancer, really any type of problem like this, is that the relationships, the connections are very, very tiny and very, very weak. So in most other fields of science, they're too small to pay any attention to. But in this field of science, they are reported and published in very prestigious journals all the time, as if they are important, but they really are not. So they're so tiny that they really don't mean anything. So for a relationship between two things to be considered important, the problem that the food is supposed to increase or decrease your risk for that disease, it's at least supposed to double it or cut it in half. So it has to be at least 2 times. So people who eat more blueberries are supposed to have at least twice, at least double the risk of dementia for that to be worth paying any attention to. But the problem is that these relationships in nutrition epidemiology are well below 2. They're well below double. They're usually not even 1.5. They're usually even lower than 1.5. So they're supposed to be ignored, but they're not. We pay a lot of attention to these and we think that they're important. Now, keep in mind that we don't actually know how many berries people are really eating because they're just guessing. So even these tiny little connections, they're not even real. It's not just that they're really tiny, they're not even real. There's no real data. Nobody is measuring anything. Nobody is recording anything. Nobody is changing anything. Nobody is saying, oh, let's give this group more blueberries and this group less berries and see what happens. They're not doing experiments. They're just guessing based on these very weak patterns. So another problem is that, so memories are not measurements, right? But also the quantities are very vague. A half cup serving of blueberries, a half a glass of this, a small slice of that. These are not scientific quantities. Now, the other issue is that these questionnaires only ask about certain foods. They don't ask about every food. And so, but don't all foods matter? So there are thousands and thousands of ingredients in the modern diet. It's impossible to design a questionnaire that's going to be able to reflect all the complexity of modern diets. So these questionnaires are usually only have maybe 100 or 130 questions, and many foods are not included. So this is why it's not scientific. So science requires measurable data, concrete measurements, not guesses. And the other thing science requires is two steps. Science requires data and science requires experimentation. And no experiments are done in that particular field, nutrition epidemiology. So this absence of data and experimentation means that epidemiology is nutrition epidemiology is not scientific. It's not, and really we need to completely ignore it. If you want your diet to be grounded in biology rather than guesswork and wishful thinking about what you imagine a healthy diet is supposed to look like, it's really important to not pay any attention to these studies. And the good news is that they're actually very easy to spot. So if you ever see a study that has many thousands of people, or it has been conducted over many years to decades, the study is very, very long, or you see that the title uses words like associated or linked or tied or correlated or risk, all of those tell you that that's a nutrition epidemiology study, and you can just understand that that's not real information. So there are two brand new types of psychiatry, new branches of psychiatry in the world, nutritional psychiatry and metabolic psychiatry. So I consider myself a nutritional and metabolic psychiatrist. So I'm a nutritional psychiatrist because I believe, all nutritional psychiatrists believe, that what we eat has a major impact on our mental health, and that if you change your diet, you can improve your mental health. So we all believe that, but we don't necessarily all agree on what the best changes are to make to the diet. So most nutritional psychiatrists will recommend a Mediterranean diet, and a Mediterranean diet, and there's a good reason for that. So the Mediterranean diet has some good evidence behind it. There are actually 3 what are called randomized controlled trials. These are very high quality studies, the experimental clinical trials, not guesswork, where they took people and divided them into 2 groups. If they had depression, give some people with depression a Mediterranean diet, and some people stay on the unhealthy standard, so-called standard American diet, or just a very highly processed food, modern processed foods diet that most people are eating. So, and they compared the depression. So for people who eating an unhealthy diet compared to a Mediterranean diet. And in 3 different studies conducted just over the past 7 years, all of these studies showed good improvement in a lot of cases of depression if you switch from an unhealthy diet to a Mediterranean diet. And that's really good news. It matters that it means that the quality of your diet makes a difference, that you can improve in some cases, even moderate to severe depression, by making these changes to your diet. Now, it's also important to point out, though, that there's a version of the Mediterranean diet, an even stricter version of the Mediterranean diet called the MIND diet, which people have believed for a long time might be good to prevent dementia and protect memory. But it was never tested until just recently. A 3-year-long high-quality clinical trial showed that so it's called the MIND diet. The MIND diet did not make any difference when it was compared to a standard diet, unfortunately. So why is the Mediterranean diet better? So the Mediterranean diet's been shown to improve a lot of different aspects of health, not just mental health, but lots of other physical health conditions. And, it's supposed to be better for inflammation. It's supposed to be better to reduce your risk of heart disease, supposed to, help you manage your weight better. All kinds of different things have been shown to be better on the Mediterranean diet. So lots of doctors recommend it to their patients because there's some good evidence behind it. Now, but why do we think it works? What is it about the Mediterranean diet that makes it better? Well, we really don't know. It's never been proved what the actual pieces of the Mediterranean diet are that are important, because there are many, many differences between a Mediterranean diet and a standard modern unhealthy diet. Many, many differences. So how do we know which differences are the ones that are responsible for the benefits? So we have theories, but we have no clear answers. But one of the most popular theories about why Mediterranean diets are better is that they're supposedly that they contain foods that fight inflammation and that fight oxidative stress. So oxidative stress is a type of damaging process in the brain that we'll talk about shortly. Oxidative stress, and this is the reason why we're told to eat antioxidant-rich foods, is to fight this oxidative stress. So inflammation and oxidative stress, we now understand that these are some of the main driving forces that can contribute to all kinds of mental health problems and physical health problems, including depression and other psychiatric conditions. Dementia, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, lots of different psychiatric conditions. You will see too much inflammation and too much oxidative stress. So is the Mediterranean diet better for the brain because it contains antioxidants and anti-inflammation ingredients? That's a theory. But what does the actual science say about these superfoods? This is a superfood theory, that certain foods have extra powers, superpowers, that can protect your brain and fight inflammation and oxidative stress. Well, let's look at each one of these popular superfoods. Blueberries, for example. Now, unfortunately, whole blueberries, like you would buy in a farmer's market or the grocery store, those are not what scientists have tested. Instead, they test products that you can't buy in the grocery store. These are specially fortified drinks and extracts and powders and blueberry products. And those results have not, and the results of these tests have not found any evidence that blueberries can improve your brain health. Turmeric is a root, and there's an extract from turmeric called curcumin, which is very popular as a supplement. So on turmeric, again, the whole food turmeric is not what's studied in clinical trials. What's studied is the curcumin extract, usually high dose curcumin that's specially changed, manipulated to improve our ability to absorb it, because it's actually very, very difficult for us to absorb the curcumin from turmeric unless we make special changes, eat it with lots of fat and black pepper and extra concentrate in high doses. So our bodies have a very difficult time absorbing these ingredients. The chocolate studies, because I want to be really unpopular now, the chocolate studies, they don't use the dark chocolate that you can buy in the store. They use specially formulated high-dose, fortified with extra flavanol, these special cocoa products that are not available in stores that have extra antioxidant molecules in them, concentrated. It's usually very, very bitter. And the few studies that did look at dark chocolate did not find any benefit. And and then the other problem with dark chocolate, of course, is it contains sugar. So there's no real evidence that the dark chocolate can fight oxidative stress, but we've got lots of evidence that the sugar in chocolate can cause oxidative stress. So if you're going to eat chocolate, you have to eat sugar-free chocolate, for example, baking chocolate, which is pure cocoa powder, which is very, very bitter. You don't want to eat the chocolate that has any sugar in it. Even the dark chocolate has lots of sugar in it. So it's a risky strategy. And then if I really want to be unpopular, I can talk about red wine. So red wine is not good for the brain. And again, the researchers do not test the effects of red wine on people with cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's. Lots of reasons for that. But the biggest reason is that the quantity of red wine that you would need to drink to be able to achieve even the lowest dosages of the antioxidant molecules in red wine, that's called resveratrol. If the amount of wine you need to drink to reach the doses used in studies is 500 bottles per day. So a typical bottle of red wine contains at most 1 single milligram of resveratrol, the active ingredient, and that lonely milligram of resveratrol is swimming in a sea of alcohol, which is a powerful promoter of oxidative stress. Just like sugar, the very same thing that you're trying to fight with the antioxidants. So these are not useful strategies. It's wishful thinking, it's marketing. And we like to believe that we can just add something magical to our diets. Go out and buy a superfood, more blueberries, more chocolate, those kinds of things. That's a delicious and easy way to try to improve your diet. And it feels positive and easy. And of course, it's profitable for the superfood industry who's trying to sell you products that contain these ingredients. And of course, we want to believe that all we have to do to relieve depression or fight off dementia is eat more chocolate and drink more red wine, right? So sign me up. I think that would be a lot of fun. But the problem is these things don't work. In fact, they can make the situation much worse. But even worse is that the problem with placing our faith in superfoods is that it distracts us from making the dietary changes that actually matter to the brain, the ones with a lot of power that can really improve your mental health within days to weeks. So you can't just protect yourself from damaging effects of an unhealthy diet by sprinkling some superfoods on top, or what you really need to do is you need to fundamentally restructure your diet from the ground up in order to get the improvements that you're looking for. So if superfoods aren't the reason why Mediterranean diets are better, why does it perform so much better in all of these studies? What is it about the Mediterranean diet that might be the real reason why it works? Well, again, we don't know for sure, but my guess is that it's being compared to a very unhealthy diet. And just about any change you make to that diet is going to be an improvement. Every diet on this slide has performed better than the so-called standard American diet. All of these diets are better. All of these diets are healthier. So now these diets may look very different on the surface, but I think, well, what does a vegan diet in common with a paleo diet? What does a Mediterranean diet have in common with a ketogenic diet? Mediterranean diet's high carbohydrate, ketogenic's low carbohydrate. Paleo diet contains meat. A vegan diet contains no meat at all. How can all of these diets be better? How can they all be good for you? And how do we know which one is best for the brain if we're not comparing them to each other? But when you actually look a little closer, what all of these diets have something very important in common. And that is that all of them are much, much lower and often completely free of refined carbohydrates, sugars, flours, syrups, crystals, liquids, juices, cereals. These refined carbohydrates are there's wide agreement about this. These are very dangerous for our metabolism and they're very powerful promoters of inflammation and oxidative stress. So maybe that's why all of these do better. The other thing is most of these diets are whole foods diets. So a lot less junk food, a lot less processed food. That's not always true. We'll talk about the low carb and ketogenic diets because sometimes those contain too much processed foods. And the Mediterranean diet, I would argue, still does too, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So how are you supposed to know which diet is actually best for your brain? All of these diets are better for your health, and the Mediterranean diet is definitely better for your brain. But do we know if it's the best diet for the brain? So I think it is very useful, and I do this in the book, is instead of asking which diet is the best one, why don't we ask a different question? Why don't we ask, what does a brain healthy diet need to accomplish? And a brain healthy diet, very simply, what it needs to do is nourish, protect, and energize the brain. It needs to contain all essential nutrients. It needs to exclude ingredients that damage the brain, and it needs to protect brain metabolism by keeping glucose and insulin levels in a healthy range. So to nourish, there's no way around this. This is a biological fact. Unless you're going to use processed foods that are fortified or supplements, if you're using only whole foods, whole plant and animal foods, you must include some animal foods to obtain all the nutrients that you need. And if you don't do that, you're going to need to supplement very, very carefully. And you may want to consider reducing or eliminating the amount of grains and legumes in your diet, because these are the beans and peas and lentils, and corn and wheat and rice and oats, because these are very low in nutrients and they're very high in something called anti-nutrients, and they also contain some natural plant toxins, which can jeopardize various aspects of mental health. And so these are some of the toxins, for example. And then how do you protect the brain? You protect the brain by excluding damaging ingredients. And the damaging ingredients are the refined carbohydrates. We already talked about flours and cereals and juices and so forth. And the refined vegetable oils, canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, corn oil. These are factory generated fats. These are not natural. The refined carbohydrates are now, the refined carbohydrates and vegetable oils are now in almost every processed and prepared food on the market. So we think about protection being about addition, adding something special to our diet. Protection is actually mostly about subtraction. It's about subtracting the things from our diet that are causing that inflammation and oxidative stress in the first place. So so how do refined carbohydrates cause problems for brain metabolism? The problem is that every time your blood sugar goes up too high, so refined carbohydrates can cause blood sugar levels to run too high. And that the high blood sugar will also cause high blood sugar in the brain. So if there's too much glucose in the blood, there'll be too much glucose in the brain. And that's going to be a problem, because every time you have too much glucose in the brain, it's going to stick. It's going to stick to all these important molecules inside the brain and create these clumps, these dysfunctional clumps called advanced glycation end products, which contribute to premature aging of the brain and other tissues in the body, and also that are going to set off these waves of inflammation and oxidative stress. So this is one of the root causes of inflammation and oxidative stress. Vegetable oils are also a powerful promoter of oxidative stress. And again, they come from factories. These are highly refined fats. This is a picture of an actual sunflower oil refinery. Nothing natural about this. And these, when these cross into the brain, which they do, the brain burns them for energy, which it's not supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be burning glucose and ketones for energy, which are much safer. It burns the extra vegetable oil for energy, and that promotes, again, lots of oxidative stress. And when you have too much oxidative stress or inflammation in the brain, it destabilizes your brain chemistry. Lots of different neurotransmitters, serotonin, melatonin, dopamine, GABA, glutamate, all of these very important brain chemicals throw off balance. If you've got too much oxidative stress, too much inflammation, or too much life or psychological stress, emotional stress too, can do the same thing. But the foods you eat can do this. The foods you eat can create a tremendous amount of stress inside the brain and destabilize your brain chemistry. Notice especially this glutamate is a very, very damaging brain chemical. If it's too high, it can cause something called glutamate excitotoxicity, which can cause damage throughout the brain, including the energy generating structures called the mitochondria. It can damage the brain's blood-brain barrier, which protects the brain from risky substances and the rest of the body. It can damage and kill cells in the hippocampus, which is the brain's learning and memory center, and cause it to shrink. So the other problem with glucose, with eating the wrong way, eating too many refined carbohydrates, is that the more carbohydrate you eat, the more insulin you need to process that carbohydrate. And those high levels of insulin will result in something called insulin resistance. The brain would become harder and harder for the brain to absorb insulin, and we really need insulin to turn glucose into energy. So your brain can be swimming in a sea of glucose and still be slowly starving to death if you have insulin resistance. And a good number of us now have, so this is plenty of glucose, not enough insulin to turn all of that glucose into energy. That's called cerebral glucose hypometabolism, which is just a fancy term for sluggish, slow brain glucose processing. The brain is not functioning at full capacity. And this is now a growing number of us. Insulin resistance is a very, very common problem around the world. And insulin resistance and slow brain glucose processing, we now know, is a key factor in all of the psychiatric diagnoses you see on this slide, including Alzheimer's disease, which is now called type 3 diabetes. It's been called type 3 diabetes for nearly 20 years already. So a few hopeful scientific trials to let you know about in terms of if you can reverse insulin resistance, which is just a problem with your glucose and insulin levels from lifestyle factors, eating too many of the wrong carbohydrates too often, overeating, eating too frequently, not giving yourself a break from food processing, not exercising enough. All of those things will keep your insulin levels too high. But the thing that drives insulin up the most is refined carbohydrate. And the thing that drives them up the second most is carbohydrates from whole foods, like fruits and starchy vegetables. So this is why carbohydrate restriction can be such a useful and powerful strategy. So if you can, this is a wonderful study. The study won an award. It was published in 2022. Dr. Cynthia Calkin demonstrated that if you could reverse insulin resistance with a medication, then you could reverse bipolar depression in every single case. Almost 90% of the patients in this study with bipolar had not had relief from their bipolar disorder for 25 years. And just turning that insulin resistance around was all that needed to happen. So in the Netherlands, about 7% of people have type 2 diabetes, which is very severe insulin resistance, where the insulin just doesn't even work anymore. or barely works anymore because you're so insulin resistant. And 40% have insulin resistance or pre-diabetes, which means that insulin doesn't work very well and the insulin levels are too high to be safe. And this is in people who are older, 55 and older. 40% of people over 55 have sluggish brain glucose processing due to insulin resistance. How do we energize the brain? So if you've got sluggish brain glucose processing, you're not going to be, more glucose will not solve the problem, because the more glucose you consume, the more insulin you will need. The more insulin you need, the more insulin resistant you become. And the harder it is for insulin to cross into the brain, and the harder it is for you to turn glucose into energy. So it's a vicious cycle. The answer is not more glucose. The answer is not more insulin. The answer is ketones. So ketones are a supplemental fuel source that can cross the blood-brain barrier and bridge that energy gap and revitalize those cells that have lost some of their ability to turn glucose into energy. And that's the beauty of metabolic psychiatry. So I'm also a metabolic psychiatrist. And this, with the diet we are most interested in, is the ketogenic diet, not the Mediterranean diet. And that's because the ketogenic diet lowers insulin levels. The Mediterranean diet is too high in carbohydrate to safely energize the brain. So the ketogenic diet is designed to lower insulin levels to the point that fat burning switches on. You can only burn fat if your insulin levels are low. Turns on fat burning, and some of that fat gets chopped into ketones, and ketones bridge the energy gap. And so ketogenic diet is a very powerful metabolic intervention. They rescue brain metabolism, and rather quickly. So some people will feel better in just 3 days after starting a ketogenic diet. So there's lots of emerging evidence in this across a wide variety of sites, where we're seeing case reports and small clinical trials and even some high quality randomized control trials demonstrating lots of promise of the ketogenic diet, almost regardless of the diagnosis. And this is a study I helped to publish in 2022, a study in France where 31 people with treatment-resistant serious mental illness, 28 of those people, we're talking bipolar disorder, major depression, schizophrenia, these folks were already taking an average of 5 psychiatric medications. They had been ill for an average of 10 years, some for as long as 30 years. And they volunteered to come into the hospital and follow a mildly ketogenic whole foods diet under supervision in the hospital by Dr. Albert Janat in Toulouse, France. And all 28 of those 31 people who could stay with the diet 2 weeks or longer, you need to do it for at least 2 weeks to start to see benefits in a lot of cases. Every single one of those patients improved. 43% of them achieved clinical remission from their psychiatric diagnosis. And most of them lost weight as well. And 64% of them were discharged from the hospital on less psychiatric medication. And the degree of benefit that we saw in people responding to the ketogenic diet was 7 to 10 times stronger benefits compared to standard medication treatments for depression and psychosis. And their metabolic health improved. Weight improved, blood pressure improved, blood glucose improved, triglycerides, which are fats in the blood, went down substantially. Even liver enzymes improved. Lots and lots of side benefits.
I have some questions here, but you already answered them. If people have any questions in this chat, please ask them now. I have a question from Ingmar. In your book, it reads that if ketones are present in the brain prefers ketones over glucose. What could be the circumstance in which both are present? I think they're always both present, but...
Exactly, Wim, you're exactly right. They're always so if you're eating a ketogenic diet, both of those molecules will be present in the brain. The brain never runs 100% on ketones. There's always some glucose available from the bloodstream to help to energize the brain. So if you're eating a high carbohydrate diet, there'll be usually just a lot of glucose, very, very small number of ketones, if any. But if you're eating a ketogenic diet, or if you're fasting, or if you're eating a very low calorie diet, then you'll start to see some ketones accumulate in the bloodstream, and those will be absorbed into the brain. And now you have a mixture of glucose and ketones. And it's not that the brain prefers ketones over glucose. It's that the brain will choose to burn a mixture of ketones and glucose to be fully energized and to be safely and fully energized. So that's a really great question, because there are a lot of people think that when they go on a ketogenic diet, the glucose goes away and the ketones take the place, but it's actually just that they're working together. There's always going to be plenty of glucose in the bloodstream to help to energize your brain.
Yeah, I've seen that when I was as a diabetic, I started the ketogenic diet. I have never 0 millimole in my blood. It's always 4 or 5.
Exactly.
I think I would die if there would be no sugar anymore. It's we as a diabetic, we have too much sugar and too much insulin. That's what's giving the problem.
Exactly.
We die right away if we don't have if we don't have any glucose in our blood. Here I have a question from Erna. How difficult is it for psychiatrists to get their patients on a ketogenic diet?
It can be very challenging. There's a lot of practical information in the book about how to do that. And then if you're a clinician and you want to know all the details about all the problems you can come into and how to help people, that's why I teach the training program. There's a lot of information specifically for clinicians in the training program, but there's quite a bit of information in the book as well. It's just not as detailed because the book was already too long. So yes, it can be very challenging, but there are some of us who have a lot of experience doing this, so we know what all the tricks are. We know what all the approaches are. And maybe Wim, you could say something about how hard or easy it was for you to switch your diet when you first changed.
It was very hard, but it was also very easy because it gave such big results. I could stop insulin within 3 days. So and I lost 10 kilos the first month. So but I could do it only 5 months. Now for years I didn't do it. Real ketogenic, I had to note every food. It was a hard journey. But I think if you reestablished your metabolism, you can be more flexible, and you don't need to be every time in the ketogenic diet. I will put on some light here. So yeah, that's my experience. Here we get the question. I have the same also written down. Erna, how do regular psychiatrists react to your findings? And that I have the follow-up question: is acceptance of metabolic psychiatry growing now? So.
Yes, it is definitely growing. The science is exploding. We're seeing more national and international articles in the media about it. We're seeing more success stories on social media, more research being published, more practitioners practicing this way, and lots of research and financial support for studies, especially because of the Bazooki Foundation, wonderful organization. And then coming to the previous question, how are general psychiatrists receiving this? How open are they? How do they respond? What do they think about metabolic psychiatry? This really depends on the psychiatrist, because I meet a lot of psychiatrists who are really excited about these interventions because all psychiatrists know that the treatments we have currently do not work very well. So we know we need more help, right? We know we're not helping enough people. We know we need new interventions. So I'm in my training program and at conferences, I meet lots of psychiatrists who are excited about these, but I also meet lots of psychiatrists in my everyday work with patients and in my general life, including friends and colleagues of mine that I've known for many, many years who are very, very closed to these ideas. They're not interested. They think they're dangerous. They think that they don't work. They're not curious. They're not even curious about them. So that's a problem, but that's always a problem whenever something new comes into the world. There will always be people who are excited about it and always people who are very conservative and resisting that change. So I think that's normal, but I do see a lot of change, really just even in the past 2 or 3 years, much more interest in this field.
Yeah, and I think also a lot of patients now who are experiencing this, who will bring that back to the doctor. So we get this flywheel, some doctors, and then the patients, the doctor see the patient, so we can get this wheel running. Can you tell something about the long-term effects of a ketogenic diet on the intestinal flora? Because the quality of the intestinal flora has a major influence on the brain.
This is true. So there are people who are studying the effect of the ketogenic diet on the microbiome, and we now have research telling us that the ketogenic diet can improve the health of the microbiome. And so that's very reassuring. And so there doesn't seem to be any need to worry about that. And there is a very strong relationship between the intestinal flora and brain health, and these are communicating with each other all the time. So there's a very important relationship there, but we don't have any evidence telling us that the ketogenic diet is dangerous for the microbiome. In fact, it looks as though it actually improves the health of the microbiome.
A question from me also. Which steps will be crucial for the development of metabolic psychiatry in the next year?
We need at least one larger randomized controlled trial in a major mental illness. So right now we don't have any randomized controlled trials in any of the major mental illnesses. We have 3 small randomized controlled trials, one in alcohol withdrawal, one in children with autism, and I'm going to forget what the third one is now. It was on a previous slide. So these are, and Alzheimer's disease. Those are the 3, but we don't have any randomized controlled trials in bipolar disorder, major depression, schizophrenia, OCD, PTSD, and they're being conducted, but we are a long way from them being published. So this is a very common criticism that more conservative academics and clinicians have about ketogenic diets. They're waiting for the randomized controlled trials before they will feel comfortable looking at these interventions.
We have a mutual friend, Ian Campbell. I think he's doing something now, starting in Glasgow. Have you heard about his work, what he's doing now with the help of the Bezuki? He has now a fellow of the Bezuki Foundation. There's something going on together with Stanford, I thought, isn't it? Are you aware of this?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Wim. So Dr. Ian Campbell, who published that bipolar study where he measured brain glutamate and saw those nice improvements with higher ketones in people with bipolar disorder at the University of Edinburgh, his work is of such high quality that he has been awarded a very large grant, a generous grant, to launch a large randomized controlled trial of ketogenic diets in bipolar disorder. And I believe he's going to be collaborating on that with Dr. Shabani Sethi at Stanford University, who published the other trial that I mentioned that showed benefits in bipolar disorder and schizophrenia.
And we were all together in Switzerland at Swiss Re, also a big company like Swiss Re is really interested. So we see a good movement in this field, and also with the podcast of Dr. Brett Scher, the Metabolic Mind, very interesting, I think. I think we run a little bit out of time. I'm very curious, what will be your next book about?
So if you have time, Wim, I have another 15 minutes. If people want to ask more questions, please feel free, but only if you can stay.
Okay. So what will be your next book about?
I have not planned another book. This book was an awful lot of work. It took 15 years to research and 2 years to write. It was I think I will leave it alone for a little while. And so I haven't, right now I have no plans to write another one, but maybe in the future.
Okay. Here we have a question from Charlotte. Is a ketogenic diet, I like this question. It's a ketogenic diet at odds with the protein transition to more plant-based eating.
Thank you, Charlotte. This is really important. A ketogenic diet is not about plants and animals. So everybody, regardless of their dietary preferences, can take advantage of ketosis. So all you need to do is change your diet in a way that lowers insulin levels. And that's not about how much meat or how many plants or animals you eat. Whether you eat a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet or a pescatarian diet or omnivore diet or a carnivore diet, all diets can be constructed to generate ketones. And that's really good news because that means everybody can benefit.
And how is your point of view? Because the best way to get in ketosis is not eating. So what is your...
That's right.
What is your point of view of intermittent fasting?
Yeah, so so everything that we eat raises insulin levels to some extent, with the exception of pure fat, it seems. But protein and carbohydrates all raise insulin. So every time you eat, most people don't eat pure fat. So every time you eat, your insulin levels are going up. And to get into ketosis, you want to make sure your insulin levels are coming down. So the best way to get into ketosis, the fastest way to get into ketosis is to not eat anything at all. So if you don't eat anything at all, your insulin levels drop like a stone. So intermittent fasting is a very effective way to get into ketosis. And it can be used in combination with a ketogenic diet. It can also be used instead of a ketogenic diet in people who don't want to commit to a consistent ketogenic diet. It's not as comfortable, it's not as effective, but it's still a very powerful and useful strategy to just eat a whole foods diet, nice clean whole foods diet, and then intermittent fasting. So eat less often, eat less frequently, but eat healthy foods, even if it's higher in carbohydrate. That can still be a very good strategy, and some people benefit simply by doing that.
Yeah, about fat, I love my Freestyle Libre, so I use it already a very long time, and we have a support group for people with type 1. You have one too. And fat is not a free food. If I eat a fatty meal in the evening, my morning glucose is higher, much higher, and also they see it has a very slow insulin response, and it even mimics the carbohydrates that you eat, so that they will come out later. So it's a little bit more nuanced. I think we will see in the future, but. Even kijken, that's also what the TB, I say it's TB. Fat is protecting the brain best, right? he says.
What's really protecting the brain isn't necessarily how much fat is in the diet. What's really protecting the brain is making sure that it's getting enough energy. So the diet doesn't even have to include fat in order to be ketogenic. It's not the fat that makes the diet ketogenic. It's the low insulin levels. So just as you were saying, Wim, it's really eating a high fat ketogenic diet isn't always the healthiest way to do it. It really depends on a lot of different factors, but it's the lowering of the insulin. So when you lower insulin, you give your body, your whole body, a break from food processing. You put it into this healing mode. You generate some ketones. You've got nice energy going. And so you can actually heal your brain even on lower fat diets, especially if you've got some weight to lose. You don't necessarily want to be eating a very high fat diet.
Yeah, the fat has to come from the belly.
Exactly.
I have a question here from Ivo, our doctor. What about the importance of brain-healthy foods to prevent mental problems in the youth with more acceptance of nutritional ketosis at young age?
I'm not sure I follow that.
What about the importance of brain-healthy food to prevent mental problems in the youth with more acceptance of nutritional ketosis at a young age?
I see. So this is getting to the question of the importance of brain-healthy diets in children to prevent mental health issues, rather than treating an existing mental health issue. Why don't we try to prevent these issues from happening in the first place by using healthier diets, brain-healthy diets in children? 100% agree with that. There's actually a whole chapter in the book about brain development and the first 1,000 days of life and what a diet for healthy children should look like. Now, this other piece of the question, so dietary quality, absolutely important for children. And think of what children eat now. Most of what they're eating is junk. Lots of sugar, lots of processed snacks. They need healthy whole foods just like the rest of us do. But then there's this question of nutritional ketosis at a young age. So this is something that I think is still very, there's a lot of resistance to this idea that nutritional ketosis could be healthy for children. But Professor Tim Noakes went to court about this in South Africa, and it has, defended the position that nutritional ketosis is safe for children. So there's lots of science behind that, but it's still a very unpopular and an uncomfortable idea for a lot of people to be thinking about.
I think there's a lot of evidence because we use the ketogenic diet for children with epileptic.
Oh, absolutely.
We have 100 years of evidence of that. It's safe, and these are really heavy ketogenic diets with MCT, with really a lot of fat, because they need to have to go very high.
There's plenty of evidence that a ketogenic diet can be safe and effective in treating conditions in children. But my impression was that this person's question was about using nutritional ketosis to prevent mental health conditions before they start. And that idea, I think a lot of people are okay if you're in a special circumstance. Okay, maybe you could use a keto. Maybe we'll do it then. But I think the idea that we would start to recommend nutritional ketosis for children to prevent mental health conditions, I think most people are not comfortable with that idea still.
We have a very big group of people with migraines, and we see also a lot of good effects of ketogenic diet on people with migraine. What is the link? Alzheimer, migraine, diabetes, bipolar disorder. What's the link?
Inflammation, oxidative stress, insulin resistance. These are the three main drivers. There are others as well, but these are three main drivers of all neuropsychiatric conditions, whether they're considered neurological or psychiatric. We see, and even physical health conditions, we see these same underlying forces. And the ketogenic diet, so cleaning up the quality of the diet will help with all of those things, and the ketogenic diet can help with all of those things. So for people, when you're eating the wrong way and your lifestyle is unhealthy, and you can get a lot of inflammation and oxidative stress and insulin resistance, and depending on who you are, it might cause different types of problems. So for some people, it might cause migraines. For some people, it might cause memory problems. For some people, it might cause depression. For some people, it might cause anxiety. That really depends on your individual vulnerabilities. But these are the same forces that are disrupting our biology. It looks a little bit different in each person.
Yeah, we call this, with Ivo, we call this metabolic dysfunction.
Yes.
metabolic dysfunction in the body and metabolic dysfunction in the brain. Because I think we are not talking about mental illness. We are talking about 60% of the people who come to the doctor who have the same three. And so it's also diabetics, heart disease, cancer. So I think this solution is not only good for the brain. It's good for longevity. It's good for it's lifestyle as medicine. I think other disease, same cure, but yeah.
100%, 100%.
A healthy brain, a healthy body, healthy brain.
They are connected.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Here, somebody says, what do you think about continuous in ketosis or for example, once a week out of ketosis?
Oh, so cycling in and out of ketosis? Yeah. So, for some people that will be safe, and for others it will not be safe. So I certainly have plenty of patients who, for the two different problems that you can see. Well, three. So one problem you can see with cycling out of ketosis is that for people with carbohydrate addiction or certain types of food addictions, they may not be able to just take one day off. They might end up taking weeks or months or even years off because it's so hard to get back into ketosis for people with food addiction. So it's not safe for them. Another issue is for some people have their psychiatric symptoms reappear very quickly, depression or psychosis or suicidal thinking. Really within 24 hours or less. And those people do not want to be out of ketosis. They feel pretty bad when they're out of ketosis. So that's another problem. And then the third problem is, how do you come out of ketosis? What foods are you going to choose on that day off? And because there are different ways to come out of it, and some of them are safer than others. So for example, you could just eat more protein or eat more calories. You could eat more carbohydrates. You could eat junk. You could eat ice cream and cookies and cake. It matters how you do it because it's unhealthy to eat the refined carbohydrates and the processed foods on your day off. So you have to think about all these different things. And you certainly don't want to take a day off when you're first getting adapted. So the first 3 months, you definitely don't want to take a day off because you want your body, your cells to shift gears and really become very efficient and comfortable at burning fat for energy before you start playing with how many days you're in ketosis.
This food addiction, that's really very important. As soon as you start eating sugar, because when I was on a ketogenic diet, I really kicked off of sugar. And as soon as I start eating sugar again, this habit, it comes back right away. It's like a drug. How is your opinion on food addiction? I think this is one of the major problems. People are addicted to these kind of foods.
It's a very real concern with a lot of science behind it. There was just actually the very first international consensus meeting about food addiction that was held in London just a few months ago, organized by Dr. Jen Unwin and some of her colleagues. She's a psychologist based in the UK who's an expert in food addiction. Lots of wonderful speakers there speaking about the science and the practical problems with dealing with food addiction in clinical practice. So we are working to get this diagnosis recognized by the World Health Organization because it was rejected when it was first proposed. It doesn't affect everybody, but it affects decent numbers of people. Depending on the study you're looking at, it could be anywhere between 10–30% of people, and a decent number of children as well. So this is a serious problem, and I think really deserves. The symptoms look exactly like any other kind of addiction. The symptoms and the behaviors are identical to addiction to any other kind of drug. So it's a very real phenomenon, and it's really the #1 challenge that clinicians like myself face when we are trying to help people get onto a ketogenic diet and stay on a ketogenic diet is this addiction to certain types of foods, most importantly, carbohydrate-rich foods, and especially the refined carbohydrates, ultra-processed foods.
Yeah, when we were in Switzerland the last day, there was this lady who also presented this research. It was on the third day in Switzerland, and she had that the food industry uses the same strategy as the tobacco industry, and that has been proven how they, there's no better client than an addicted client.
Oh, yeah, you have a lifelong customer, right? You have a customer that's completely dependent on your products. And that's a great point, Wim, because the food manufacturers, their main goal is to make money. They don't care about your health. So you have to care about your own health, and you have to protect yourself. You can't trust anything they're saying because they have a different goal than you do. Your goal is to be healthy. Their goal is to sell you products. So it's really important not to listen to what they tell you. And it's really important to practice abstinence from those foods especially if you have food addiction. They're designed to be addictive.
And I think, as you told, not everybody is addictive, but that's typical. Not everybody gets addictive to drugs or drink. And some people are people with PTSD, people with HDID, people who are poor, people with a lot of stress. They are so people who are likely to become obese or diabetic are more likely. They are probably also addicted.
You're absolutely right that everything you said is 100% true. So not everybody, even if the food is engineered to be addictive, not everybody will be vulnerable to that. So just like alcohol it's addictive for many people, but not all people. So I can have one glass of wine and walk away, but I cannot have something with flour in it. And I'm very, very vulnerable to eating sugars and starches. So we're all a little bit different. But the fact, as you say, it's absolutely true that these foods are very addictive for some people. They don't have to be addictive for everybody for it to be a very real and very significant problem.
And there I see a question who's a little bit related. Is there any truth to sweeteners causing cardiovascular disease like erythritol? I have my thoughts on it as well. It's like a methadone, I think.
Harm reduction, yes.
So how your point of view on sweeteners?
So I do include information about the sweeteners in my book and in my training program, and I haven't looked closely at the studies with erythritol and heart disease. I just haven't had time to look at those. But what I do know, and I'll let you speak to that, Wim, if you happen to know more about those. But I do caution people about sweeteners to make sure they understand that a lot of the sweeteners, even if they some of them actually raise your glucose levels, like maltitol and xylitol, and some of them raise your insulin levels, even if they don't raise your glucose levels. And so that's important too. And the third aspect of understanding the sweeteners is that these sweeteners can contribute to cravings for things that taste sweet, so they can keep your interest in sweets alive and make it harder for you to follow a healthy diet and be interested in other types of foods. So those are some of the problems you can run into. But did you have something more you wanted to say, Wim, about erythritol?
No, just about the same what you told. You still be addicted to sugary foods if you use the sweet. You don't take away the addiction.
Exactly. And I, my folks do best, my patients do best, and I personally do best when I'm not consuming any sweeteners at all. But when I do use a sweetener, there's the one that I use is allulose. That's the one that's the least problematic for me. A lot of my patients find that some people do better with stevia, some people do better with monk fruit. I don't like the taste of those, but if you are going to use a sweetener, make sure it doesn't raise your glucose levels, make sure it doesn't reduce your ketone levels, and make sure it doesn't kick those cravings up. And be careful not to overuse them. Be careful just to use them when you just sparingly.
Yeah, it's something. just looking at the cake might raise your insulin level.
That's true.
It's already, your saliva gets already, I want this.
I know. Even just talking about it is making me think, oh, cake sounds, it sounds so good.
Okay, now it's almost 9 o'clock here in the Netherlands. It's already getting night. Thank you very much for this great webinar and all the questions and all the answers. You answered. Thank you very much, Georgia, and I hope your book will be translated in all the languages of the world, and that it should be teach on psychiatry on the school. And show us your book. I have it.
I have it right here.
I have I have the one. I have it here.
Yeah, we have.
There
we go. So the Netherlands was the very first country to translate the book to a different language, and I'm very, very grateful for that and excited that I'm very, very happy that it was Dutch that was first. We're going to have Polish coming, Japanese, Korean, French, Spanish. I'm forgetting something, I'm sure, and Russian. So we have a lot of new languages coming soon, but the Netherlands was first.
And I have a signed one.
Of course, yes, because you were the reason that got the publisher interested in looking at this book, and I'm very, very grateful to you, Wim, for all your advocacy work. You're sharing your knowledge so generously with people to help them improve their mental and physical health and their metabolic health. You're doing really wonderful work, and I think it's in no small part thanks to you that people in the Netherlands are generally they're a little ahead. They're ahead of a lot of other countries in understanding and being open to ketogenic diets. So thank you for all of your advocacy, your education work, and your own sharing your own personal story and helping other people get healthier. Yeah,
we have already now a group of one of our Facebook groups. We have it for bipolar people. We have already 200 people with bipolar disorder in a Facebook group, and we are helping each other without doctors and clinicians because we need to train them, and so we are starting ourselves. And we already 200 people now in the group, and it's going great.
I love that. Thank you so much for doing that, and thanks to everybody who came to listen to our conversation today and to ask these amazing questions. And I'm really, really glad that all of you were able to come. And Wim, again, thank you very much for inviting me.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye, dankjewel.